Welcome to Respawn Aim Fire, the Kick-Ass Irreverent Gaming Podcast. We have another spoiler cast for The Last of Us Part 2. Part 2. Because it's the second time we're doing one of these. I'm here with Chad Michael Ennis, who's here for the and hosted the last one. Dallas Smith, who is also there for the last one as well, but bringing him back on again. Alex Cozina, who just finished Last of Us 2 days ago, or yesterday.
Yeah, real soon.
Yeah, really recently. So both of us kind of played it later than everybody else. And we're here just to share our thoughts on Last of Us Part 2 again. Because, spoiler alert, it's a masterpiece and it's worth talking about this much.
I'm so happy you think so.
I think that it's worth talking about. I feel like my opinion might diverge from yours a little bit.
Get off the show. I'm just kidding.
This is a circle jerk only. No, we know what Chad's opinions of this are now. We know what Dallas's opinions are because they're in the last spoiler chat. I've hinted at kind of what I think about this, not going into detail on the podcast. But Alex, we haven't gotten your impressions yet. So what are your just initial impressions of Last of Us Part 2?
I think that The Last of Us Part 2 is nothing less than a great game. I think that its first half suffers from some... Here's the thing. I don't want to say pacing issues because I feel like pacing issues has just become a shorthand on the internet at this point for I didn't think that The Last of Us was perfect, and I'm just going to leave it at that. To offer a more nuanced response, I think that the first half of The Last of Us goes to lengths to try and prove what it's trying to communicate too hard, and I think that the game suffers because of that. However, once we get into the second half of the game, especially after like day 2 of Abby, spoilers, I think that the game is almost perfect with a few, minor blemishes here and there.
Yeah, I want to return to the pacing part especially. I think it's a very interesting... With a movie, I think that's a better argument to make. But with a game, like, when did you start playing and end playing during your sessions? Like, that's an interesting conversation to kind of get into with pacing. Yeah, I really enjoyed the game immensely. I thought it was fantastic. I'll kind of get more into it as we get into each part of it, though. But I guess let's start off with just the story itself, because I think that's probably the most important part with The Last of Us. Actually, Chad, Dallas, do you want to share your impressions again? Even though you've already said them on the last one. Do you want to just...
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Cozy makes a great point where the beginning, not so much pacing, but it definitely tried to drive home something, and it did seem to drag at points. That's an excellent point he brought up. But yeah, I enjoyed it immensely. It's nothing less than a great game. Like Cozy said, it may be a masterpiece in my opinion too. I need to sit with it longer. I think the further I get away from it, the more emotional distance I have with it. So it's not as good as it was right when I finished it. Especially seeing the nitpicky stuff that people have been posting about and stuff. But yeah, I still love the game. It's basically a masterpiece.
My one sentencer that I've kind of been like propagating around is that, like, it's the least fun game I've ever played in my life, and it's also a masterpiece that everyone should play. That's my high level opinion on it, and I still think, like, since I beat it, I guess it's 2 weeks ago now, I still think about it every single day. I think about it every single day. Love it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I do feel like I should mention that I was spoiled on the game. I saw the leaks. So I do think that's something important to mention from my opinion. Did you see them as well, Alex?
I am in the same boat. I was spoiled in a very similar manner as well, yeah.
I actually would like to start off, though, with just sharing what we knew ahead of time, because I think that's important to kind of discuss that I do feel like I view the story very differently as a result, and I'm curious kind of what you felt about that. So what did you know ahead of time?
I knew that Joel died at Abby's hands via the beating with a golf club. I knew that I knew that you would switch over to Abby at least partway through the game, and I knew that Abby and Ellie would basically be going at it and being very mean to each other. That's, and I knew little things as well, like I knew about Lev as a character in the game, things of that nature, but I would say that those are like the big things I was spoiled on.
Everything there, and then I also knew about Abby's dad was killed at the hospital, and he was the doctor.
Right, yeah. So I want to start off by saying that, knowing in advance what was going to happen in the game, I would say helped and hindered my experience in different ways. On one hand, I actually really appreciated that the game got Joel's death out of the way so soon, because going into the game, I was really concerned that Joel was going to die like 20 hours into the game, and I was concerned that the entire time I was just going to be in a like panic of great, here's another scene where we get to see Joel and we know that his death is inevitable and it's going to be just so how to say, like, stressful to have to play through this entire time knowing that he's fated to be killed off. And so for the game to kill him off early on, it was hugely stressful leaving to me personally, even though obviously it wasn't cool that Joel got killed. Cool in the sense that, like, I thought that, like, let me be perfectly clear. I think that for the purpose of the story that they were trying to tell, I think that it was the right decision. I mean, not cool in the sense that, like, obviously it's this beloved character getting killed off, purely in that sense. On the other hand, I would say that knowing that the game was going to be dealing with, you know, Ellie going into Seattle, slowly killing off members of the side that Abby was on, I feel like it sort of it put my expectations in check, that this was going to be a story that was very much going to be painting a dark picture of what Ellie was going to be doing. And so when the game, you know, started driving home the point of like, hey, you're not necessarily the good person in this scenario, you are the villain to the other person's story, like, I kind of got that message a lot sooner, I would say, than maybe if I hadn't been spoiled to what a lot of the game was going to be about. And I'd say that that's sort of what made me a lot more quickly fatigued during the first half of the game.
Interesting. So yeah, I do definitely feel you with how knowing kind of, I knew the cycle of violence thing was going to be a huge part of the story. And so as soon as Joel died, I'm like, oh, there's more to Abby. Matter of fact, I actually remember, Dallas, you were saying like the moment you kind of fell in love with Abby was with like the whole zebra and her helping the zebra out. I fell in love with her like when we first met her in the mountain, and she finds out that Owen's gonna have a kid, and she looked upset about it. Instantly there, because I'm like, I knew they were gonna lead me on this way of starting to like her. So like when I saw her there, and I'm like, yeah, she is kind of a sweet person. Like her expressions on her face and how she was hurt by that, but didn't show like, I'm like, I do like her. And then when she got hit, like was beating Joel with the golf club, I'm like, what a bastard. But also like, yeah, I'm gonna grow to love her. So like, it was definitely a different moment that I think for a lot of people who didn't know where it was going to go. And I think that for me it worked, but I definitely can see, Alex, where you're coming from, where it can be fatiguing, because when you kind of know where something is going for a good like 10 hours before things get to where you were expecting them to go, I could definitely feel that. I think for me, what saved me there is the gameplay, which we'll talk about later on.
Yeah, I'm more or less in agreement with you there.
Did you, or you in any way like wary on the spoilers? Like when you heard, heard about
not
it?
Trusting them?
Not trusting them, but like, oh, I don't like the direction the story was going in. Or did you already kind of have a comfort towards where the story was going?
I mean, I feel like I was kind of ambivalent. I didn't love what I learned, but, you know, I kind of expected from experience to just kind of trust that Naughty Dog knew what it was doing, and that in the end, they were going to deliver a solid story. Because there have been a couple of leaks of this nature in the past where, like, only the basic plot point summary of whatever story got leaked. And that turned out not to be very indicative of what the actual game is like. I'm blanking on what games I'm thinking of right now. But yeah, I never doubted that Naughty Dog would be able to turn it around into a successful experience. So... yeah, I would say I was ambivalent.
I had more faith in Naughty Dog than I think I would have given other developers if I had heard leaks this huge. I think I even texted Dallas, like, because you asked me like what I knew, and I'm like, I'm not telling you anything, but like, it's fucking brilliant, it's amazing. Yep. I can't wait to see this. I just had so much faith in where they're going, and I think that's also a big reason why I just kept loving it as I went along, because like I had that faith. I kind of knew where it was going, and I was liking the idea already. It was really bold. I think I liked it a lot for a lot of the same reasons I liked Last Jedi, which is that it took the franchise in a very different direction than what you might have been expecting. But for me, Last Jedi felt extremely Star Wars the entire time, and this felt extremely Last of Us. So I was excited when I heard these really bold changes they were going to make.
It's a perfect analogy, Holden. Perfect.
Everyone will agree with that. Everyone loved Last Jedi.
Can I, while we're on the topic of spoilers, can I ask? I'd like to say that I've learned a little bit of empathy from playing this game. And my initial reaction whenever I hear that somebody purposely sought out spoilers for this game is like, I want to punch you till you're dead.
Wow.
But I'd like to. I've learned to withhold that and try to understand where you're coming from. I would love to know, like, why, like, what drove you to go look at the spoilers for this game?
Like for me personally, basically I was not expecting to play this game as early as I ended up playing it. So with the original The Last of Us, I ended up playing that game on the PlayStation 4, I think at the end of 2014. Like I had no interest in playing that game when it first came out, and I eventually just kind of played it because like I feel like I need to play it so I can be in the know. And it was a similar thing with this game where, like, I enjoyed the original The Last of Us, but I don't feel, utterly obliged to play this game right away. And it was only when this other podcast that I'm part of, Press YYZ, was all like, hey, we're all playing The Last of Us Part 2 at launch. And I was like, all right, I guess I have to play it at launch as well so that we can have our own discussion about it. So, and that decision only came after the leaks happened. So, yeah, I didn't have an issue leaking myself to it because I'm like, I expect that I'm probably not going to play this game for a year and a half. And so I didn't see any issue doing that right away.
Gotcha. Rather not torture yourself for a year and a half trying to avoid spoilers. You're like, might as well just give in.
Yeah.
Well, I did know I was going to be playing it later because I knew I was going to be taking that kind of 2-week boycott at that point. And I figured like maybe that would help me. I think it's a small part of it for me. But I think ultimately, like, sometimes I care about spoilers and sometimes I don't. It's kind of like there's no like litmus test where I have where it's like, ooh, like I will never find a spoiler out about. Like I'll say like Mr. Robot. Like I didn't want to know anything. Like I didn't want to know anything at all. I just wanted to watch it and like see how it played out. But when there's something like really big, culturally significant, like the Rise of Skywalker leaks, or the Game of Thrones leaks, or actually I didn't watch the Game of Thrones leaks, or like in this case, the Last of Us Part 2 leaks, I find just the narrative of what was leaked, what's the discussion around those leaks at the time, and how does that contrast to the response after it comes out. And I feel like if I want to have the most informed opinion I could have on that topic, I need to see those leaks ahead of time. So like Rise of Skywalker was an interesting one for me because the same people who were leaking out Game of Thrones, which I didn't see those spoilers, ended up being extremely right. And I'm kind of like, oh, like let me see, like, are they going to be as negative about Rise of Skywalker as they were about Game of Thrones? And did that like form their opinion afterwards? Like that I find is interesting. I also find with me that spoilers and knowing things or having preconceptions ahead of something usually doesn't influence how I feel about something as I go into it. It's like Rise of Skywalker, for example. I hated the C-3PO scene in that trailer where he's like, I'm so glad to be gone all my friends. Fucking hated that scene in the trailer. In the movie, didn't bother me. I'm like, why not? What? They did it. They stuck the landing on that specific scene. There was parts around that scene that were terrible, but they're terrible for different reasons, not like what I was thinking ahead of time. So like I feel like I can go into something and say, hey, it's this is going to be good, not because of the specific bullet points on the list of what happens in this story, but how they go between those bullet points and how they nail the execution. So I feel like it generally doesn't impact me that much anyway.
I can't claim that spoiling myself to what happened in this game didn't affect my enjoyment of it. I will say, though, that I did read a lot of reviews of this game before playing it, both positive and negative, and I didn't IMO find that those affected my enjoyment of it. So there is that, at least for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's...
I don't know how I could have dealt with knowing that Joel was dying at some point. Going into that game. Like, I mean, Chad brought it up before. I had the same idea that I thought it was going to be Dina. Right. This was going to be a redemption story of redeeming Dina's death or whatever. But when Joel died, I was like, oh, shit. All right. Like, was not expecting it, especially that early.
I'm sure that Holden and Alex, you still had plenty of surprises within the story for yourselves as well. But I feel like one of the biggest surprises to me was finding out that I was going to play half the game as Abby. And like when I made that realization halfway through the game, I was like, oh shit, like that was such a mind-blowing moment for me. And to know that you guys just went into it, like, all right, I know sometime I'm going to be done with Ellie, and I can't wait to be done with Ellie.
I had that moment. I had that moment when I saw the spoilers. I'm like, whoa, we're going to get to play the other side. That's amazing. I had that moment. I just had a many-month delay between having that moment and playing that moment. That's all.
But you didn't experience her killing Joel before it.
Actually, I did because I saw that video. That video.
It was a video? Oh, shit.
Yeah, it was a video, yeah.
Well, in my case, it is true that I was spoiled to the fact that I was going to be playing through half the game as Abby. One thing that I wasn't spoiled to, and that actually genuinely did sort of take me by surprise, was what Abby's section of the game was all about. Here's the thing. When I reached the end of Ellie's section of the game, I was honestly somewhat concerned that Abby's section of the game was going to be basically this cat and mouse game where she will hear about some member of her squad that Ellie killed. She'll go to a location that she last heard Ellie was at. She'll learn that Ellie is now somewhere else, and that would be the whole extent of her campaign.
Yeah.
And so going to her side of the game and then discovering, oh no, like with the exception of a few minor crossovers here and there, her story is like largely separate from Ellie's story, was a very pleasant surprise that I greatly appreciated.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in fact, she's moved on. She doesn't care about Ellie ananymore. She's like, cool, I've closed that chapter. I'm dealing with other shit.
She didn't even really know who Ellie was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with Alex completely. Like, I didn't know it was going to go back to Seattle day one. I had this image in my head that what was going to happen was Joel was going to die, Ellie was going to go after her, and then there was something in the leaks that said very specifically that Ellie was in captivity by Abby, and then Abby let her go. But that was actually just when Joel killed, Abby killed Joel,
right.
Not some later point in the story. So I was expecting this moment where I'm like, oh, Ellie's going to get kidnapped, and Abby's going to say, like, look, just go.
Right.
You've gotten your revenge. Like, do it. And then the rest of it is then going to be, like, what was it? Oh, Ellie apparently then escaped and, like, killed a bunch of people, and that's what upset Abby, and then Abby was going to go after Ellie. Like, that's kind of the image I had of it. So I kind of had this, like, vague notion that ended up being wrong. So there definitely was that big surprise for me. It's like, oh, I'm going to be seeing Abby's story. And because I played it in essentially 2 sittings, yeah, it was 2 sittings, I felt kind of refreshed to have it be a different story that then kind of ties in. That was nice. Because I agree, Alex, if it was this like cat and mouse game between, oh, I heard Ellie's over here, let me go over there, and I'm like, I've been over there, I know exactly what that level is going to look like when I go over there. That could have been bad, and it wasn't bad.
I had that concern as well. That's a great point. Absolutely. As soon as that day one, Seattle, I was like, I got to go everywhere that Ellie's been this whole time. I'm just going to follow her around and just be like a step behind her the whole time. Like, come on. But yeah, it was awesome to see. It was totally different.
The only thing I will say, though, is that because it is so totally different from what Ellie was doing, when you finally do loop back around and meet up with Ellie at the movie theater, I honestly was kind of like, I don't even remember what Ellie was doing last or where her head was at. So that is sort of like a small little criticism there. But I don't feel like it is... Like, at the end of the day, I felt like that criticism that I had at the end of that campaign did not match up with the praise that I had for how different it was than how I was expecting it to be.
Let's move on to the story itself then. Like, outside of the context of spoilers, just like the story itself. You kind of mentioned some kind of slowness in the beginning and the contrasting of the end, Alex.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that, like, the opening of the game, like, up until I would say you first start fighting human enemies in Seattle, I'd say is actually pretty solid all around. I don't have any real issues there. It's just, once you start fighting human enemies, the game really wants to drive home the point that these are actual human people with their own, like, lives that you're killing off, and it's trying to really reinforce this idea that Ellie is the villain of Abby's story or of all these other characters' stories. And I just feel like it goes on this sort of one note for, I feel like, a little bit too unnecessarily long of a period of time. And I feel like they could have told that section of the story more quickly using many fewer encounters, IMO.
Yeah, I can feel that because, like, I mean, thinking about how Seattle Day 2 was basically about her going to the hospital, and and then Sail Day 3 was her going to the aquarium, both of which are basically just stories about her going to kill someone who was involved in the death of Joel in some way. So yeah, there was definitely more repetition. I can definitely feel that.
And it's one of those things where a lot of reviewers that have been more critical of this game have said that this game is just torture porn, that it's just two people going at each other and it's wallowing in misery and torture and pain. And it's like, I don't agree with that. I think the game is much deeper overall than that. But I can totally see how, you know, like playing through just the first section of the game, you can leave that being like, oh man, this is just a little bit too much if you already were not down what the game was about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Especially in the hospital. When I forgot who you were going after, what her name was in the
Nora.
hospital.
Yeah.
Nora, and you have her cornered in the room with the red lighting, and Ellie's looking furious and angry, and I'm like, ooh, is she going to do it? Is she going to do it? And then Square pops up, and I'm like, no, fuck you, no. And I'm like, I'm going to wait this out. And I'm like, I didn't do it. But Ellie's face kept getting more heated, and like she was breathing heavier, and I'm like, yeah, fuck, I just sat, and I'm like, Square, damn it. And like, popped again, I'm like, Square, I fucking hate this game. No, it was a really impactful moment. It was a great moment, but it was harsh.
Let me ask a question for the room here. Do you guys think that it was a mistake that the game saved the final flashback between Joel and Ellie until the very end of the game? Because I feel like after watching that flashback, I definitely gained a lot more insight into why Ellie was acting the way that she did. But I feel like I would have appreciated that scene a lot sooner, because after coming out of the hospital scene, we're presented with the flashback where it's revealed that Ellie actually learned that she was the cure for the Fireflies and that Joel killed off all the Fireflies and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that actually made me understand the hospital scene and everything that had come before that even less. And it kind of remained that way for a while until, as I said, we got to the end of the game.
That's an interesting question. I think it almost drove me to. It's tough to look back at it now, especially playing a little bit of it again. It drove me to want to play it again to really see it through those eyes the second time. It's a good point. Maybe if I had seen that earlier, it would have been driven home even more. But I think it like carried me along to see if this ever got resolved between those two. And, you know, to get hit with that final blow at the end there, it was just, I don't know, it was a pretty emotional point in that game. I don't know if it would have been as emotional earlier, but it definitely might have opened my eyes to her drive earlier, for sure.
For one, I think just in general, the flashbacks and the pacing of them and spreading them out across the entire game, I loved it, because every single time we had another one that showed something different, it completely reframed the entire rest of the game that I had already played and made me think about it in a completely different way. And then it just kept doing that every time I saw something new. But I think that one specifically, and it's about her saying that, like, what you've done to me, for me, is something really, really terrible that I struggle to forgive you with, but I'm willing to try. Like that breaking down of her barrier and saying, I get it a little bit, I'm willing to be open-minded, I think reflects so much on where I think she is with Dina at that moment, at the very, very end of the game, where she's done a lot of terrible things, and she's done something terrible to Dina and walked out on her. And she's right now, in that moment, hoping that Dina is willing to take her back. Because that's where I think she's going at the end of it, is to say, hey, I'm at peace, I've found peace finally, and I'm ready to come back and try again. And hopefully you can feel the same way that I did about Joel. So I love that those two were right next to each other, because that's how I kind of interpreted where she's going at the end.
She's going for the cure.
You think so?
I put that in my mind. That's my yeah. That's my theory now. I'm holding on to that one. I love it.
We have very different views on this. So I have a different one altogether as well. And that's kind of cool, this ending. I think that's the success of this ending, is everyone has this different, like, kind of view where it's going to go.
It's like the Sopranos ending.
Yeah, I feel like it was a good setup for Last of Us Part 3, having that flashback right in that moment. For me, it put that context of why she was walking away. And I thought a lot about why, and I think you put it really well with the barrier, Chad. I like that. I hadn't thought about it in quite that context, but it fits with kind of how I view it very well, which is Joel had this barrier up after his daughter died. And it was Ellie that helped him kind of free that barrier and open himself up. He's a much warmer person in The Last of Us Part 2 than we had seen him in The Last of Us Part 1. And I feel like Ellie's... What was Joel's daughter's name?
Sarah.
Ellie's Sarah, the thing she would hold on to was the fact that she was the cure. And that Joel took that away, and she basically says it, like Joel took that away from her. Her meaning for life is gone. And I think that in that moment when she was talking to Joel, it hit me something she had said earlier, which was that, and I can't remember now if this is in part 1 or part 2, that actually it was in part 1, when Joel is dropping Ellie off at Tommy's. And he's like, Tommy, take her, I'm gone. And Ellie gets really mad at Joel because he's like, no, fuck you, dude. Everyone has left me. Everybody has walked away or they've died. And you're doing it too. And that crushed her. And I think that even though Joel was the person who took the immunity away from her, he was also the person that could still break down Ellie and create and allow her to feel and be with people, like the whole Sarah to Ellie story with Joel. She lost both things there. And I feel like the playing the guitar with missing fingers as the reminder of missing Joel, missing the cure, is just setting her out on that mission. And I think this is kind of where I'm hoping part 3 goes. I think this would be a good story is she going after Abby again to kill Abby? And if Abby with the Fireflies... And Abby's now at the Fireflies. So if she kills Abby, they're going to kill her, which is going to interfere with that whole idea of the cure, and if she could be the cure. And I think that's a really interesting dramatic tension where she's going to choose where does the purpose of my life lie? Choosing love and being the cure for humanity, or choosing to delve into hate and avenging Joel with Abby because she just can't let it go. That decision is still before Ellie. And I really, really want to know where that plays out.
I'm telling you, she's going to get the cure.
It seemed for a second ago, Holden, like I was about to start laughing. I wasn't laughing at you. I was just laughing at the idea of Ellie's just like, I can't let it go. I got to keep going at it. I'm like, all right, well, time for another epilogue. That's the length of Return of the King, I guess.
I can't.
But she doesn't think there's any cure for the cure.
I can't have her going after Abby again, wanting to kill her, because then that means this entire game was for nothing. Like, she learned nothing from all of this hate and losing everyone. I can't see that. And if it happens, I'm going to boycott it for 2 weeks, and then I'll play it again.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's tough to really read into what she should or would do. But, you know, in my opinion, I think she's come to face the fact that, you know, maybe Dina's better off without her. Maybe the world's better off without her, because she has a purpose to, without her being there, cure. You know, so maybe that's what she's doing. I hope that's what she's doing. I'd like to think.
Well, even if she goes to the cure, though, she's gonna meet Abby.
Yeah, and I don't think
is going to be there.
That's what I think maybe the gameplay would be like. Oh, well, here comes this chick again, and we got to kill her. So you got to kind of kill some of these dudes, but then the whole time you're shooting everybody like, wait. I'm the cure, remember? I came here.
I want part 3 to take a complete U-turn and just have like Resident Evil style puzzles where you're just mixing things in tubes and trying to figure out which one makes the cure.
I think these are all great ideas. Personally, I ascribe more to the idea that The Last of Us Part 3 is about them discovering that Tommy is secretly a Terminator from the future, and they have to hunt down Tommy. I think that there's potential in that idea. They're like, wait a minute, you survived getting shot in the head like 5 times this entire game. How are you still alive?
He's a great sniper.
Yeah,
Somehow
I was
that helps
so
him.
convinced he was. I was so convinced he was dead, and they show that shot of him at Dina and Ellie's house, and he's got like it looks like he got shot through the eye or something like that. I'm like, you'd still be dead. You would still be dead.
It's like a glancing blow, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. I'm not super upset about
He's
it.
like
But definitely was
Nathan-
I was definitely confused.
He's like Nathan Drake in the Uncharted games. He didn't actually get shot. It's just his luck is running out, basically.
Yeah.
And so he was like an inch away from his luck fully running out.
Cool. So I want to return to the pacing idea and kind of this game being criticized for the pacing. Because personally, I think that's a strange conversation to have about a video game in this context. Did you guys feel like there was a pacing issue in this?
I mean, I feel like I've already made my stance apparent that, yeah, I felt very similarly about Uncharted 4, where I thought that, like, the story of Uncharted 4, like, from top to bottom was excellent, but I just felt like there were, like, a few two chapters too many to kind of drive home what it was trying to go for. And I think that the same is true here. I am, like, so I do want to say something. I didn't, I know that we were getting at this sooner or later. I didn't absolutely love the combat, and I do wonder to what degree that contributed to me feeling like the pacing was off. So, like, while I was playing the game, you might recall that I put out a tweet where I'm like, I don't like the combat of The Last of Us Part 2. I think that it's like Metal Gear Solid, but it doesn't give you all the tools to kind of properly play it as such. I'm going to rescind that statement a little bit here, in that I feel like going into The Last of Us Part 2, I was somehow convinced, based on impressions that people had given of the game online, that it was going to be like Metal Gear, but in the universe of The Last of Us. And that's really not it. My perspective on the combat of the game is that it's like, it gives you all these different systems, stealth, guns, bombs, etc., but each system is a little bit rough on the edges, where you can never fully complete a combat encounter with any one system, and so you're encouraged to kind of swap between them on the fly. And I feel like it took me a little while to kind of fully come to accept that. I think that I tried for a little bit too long to play according to one style of gameplay, and I acknowledge that maybe that influenced my perception of the game's pacing at certain moments. At the same time, I'm still not going to sit here and say that I absolutely love the combat.
So do you guys with the pacing of the game? I like the combat conversation. There's definitely something there. And so I'm going to get the general impressions on pacing, and we'll delve deeper into that. Did you guys feel like there was anything with about the pacing that bothered you at all, or?
I felt a bit of frustration, just when that day one Abby hit. At that point, I was, you get that tense standoff moment where Abby's got the gun on you, she just shot Tommy. And I was like Alex brought up earlier, how, like, am I going to have to retrace all this shit again? Mm-hmm. Other than that, I plowed through it pretty, see, pacing issues in video games are tough for me to talk about, because I take my time playing games, so everything is paced pretty shittily, in my opinion. But that's just how I like to play games. So no, I didn't really have an issue with the pacing. I was just stressed for the most of the time, so it was just very stressful and emotional pounding that I took. But other than that, the pacing was fine.
I will say that, like, day one of Abby's campaign is the day that reminds you the most of what's been happening in Ellie's campaign leading up to it. Like, all the characters that you meet up with it, some of the locations that you travel to, you're constantly reminded, like, hey, all these characters are going to be dead by the end of this. And I would say it's only really at the beginning of day two, well, not even that, even like the end of day one, that, like, it starts to kind of fall into its own rhythm.
Agree.
Yeah, I talked about I wouldn't call them issues with pacing, but my thoughts on the pacing on the last spoiler cast, and it's mostly that the last 8-10 hours of the game, I didn't want to play anymore. Like, I was done. Like, every new firefighter was like, gotta go through this again. And then we get to the end of the game, or what I thought was the end of the game, we're at our farmhouse, and I'm like, oh, fuck, now there's a whole new faction in Santa Barbara we gotta go deal with. But at the same time, I acknowledge that that's also brilliant, because, yeah. But it's brilliant, because that's exactly how they felt. Like, Ellie wanted to go and just live on the farm and just have a life with Dina and the kid, but she couldn't, because she was exhausted. She emotionally could not let go. And so I was not allowed to let go of the game. Like, I had to keep playing because she had to keep going in order to just put to rest what was bugging her. So while I did not want to, quote unquote, play the last 8 to 10 hours of the game, I think it was kind of a brilliant story move to tie that in. And everyone I've talked to also kind of had that same feeling. I was like, they're just exhausted by the end of the game.
I feel like that scene where she's walking out the door of the farmhouse is like the new San Andreas meme. They're like, oh shit, here we go again meme. You know what I mean? It's like, oh shit, here we go again. We're going to go fight some more gunfights. And the only thing for me was, at that point, I knew it was close to the end of the game, so all the shit that I had saved and never used, I was like, I'm just going to use it all. I don't have to worry about saving all this shit anymore. So those last moments were the most fun for me. Like that compound, I had a blast in there.
I didn't feel any pacing issues in the game for me personally, and I think that it's just that this game has two heavy dichotomies. It has one which is really intense action. Even if you're not fighting, you're playing stealth, it is extremely intense. And then you have contrasting moments where you're just walking through a museum with Joel and putting a hat on a stegosaurus, because
or having a snowball
and adorable
fight.
and sweet, and having a snowball fight. Like there's this huge juxtaposition to it, but it's because it's a very emotional story, and the world that's presenting has a great range of emotion in it. And I feel like that is not a pacing issue. That's just hey, if you thought those parts were slow, you need that for the story. Like,
a realistic
and if you didn't
view.
Yeah, but the pacing's in your hands. Like, you can just walk past most of the museum and get it over with in 5 minutes if you wanted to. But like, I wanted to spend time and listen to all the conversations about astronauts with Joel and how she knew who, the first person in space was. Like, those kind of small like things. Like, I want to spend time with that. Doesn't mean you have to. And I feel like so much of this game in particular is in your hands with how you want to play it. I actually went through the Hillcrest level again and just blew past it. It's actually a really fast level.
Yeah.
But you can really spend your time in that level and do what you want and go slow. Like, it's actually, because I played this game. You guys think it took you like 25, like 30 hours?
37.
37. I beat it under 19 hours.
It's
and
insane.
it's not like I was trying.
Wow.
I just that's just what it panned out to be based on kind of how I wanted to play it. And some combat scenarios, I thought, hey, running away right now is the better option. So I would just book it and run off. And I think a lot of decisions like that I had made led it to 19 hours. So I'm like, I feel like the pacing is so much in your hands in this game that it's not that it has a pacing problem. It's just that it's very emotionally diverse.
Some people didn't know that's an option, though. Like, I mean, not that I didn't know. I'd normally just kill everything I see anyways. But like, if I'd known that I could run through all this stuff, then maybe I'll survive. I'll let some of those dogs survive here and there. But I just killed them all instead.
So I do feel though, like, where people can say there was pacing. I think Alex brought up a really good point with like a lot of the things Ellie was doing was kind of repetitive. I feel that for sure.
Like, I will say, when I think back to Abby's campaign, the moments that stick out to me are crossing the bridge created by the Seraphites, descending down. Yeah, it's descending down the skyscraper that they crash into. A lot of the stuff that takes place on the island that the Seraphites live on, which, like, there's combat here and there in all those sections, but those are all also sections that are dominated by a lot of non-combat moments. And I feel like when I think about Ellie, I think a lot about just combat.
Right. Especially when she was alone. That she didn't have a companion for most parts, and pretty lonely.
Let's talk about gameplay. So you kind of talking about the gameplay, Alex, and your thoughts. Before we jump into that, though, do you guys want to kind of go back over Alex and Chad Dallas, your kind of thoughts on the combat? Kind of reiterate your thoughts there for people who didn't listen to the spoiler cast.
Okay, Chad.
I enjoyed it. I had a good time. Used the bow a lot. I like you can craft ammo for weapons. I felt like that brought a new kind of complexity to making the decisions of what you want to use your shit on, but also got you out of some sticky situations sometimes. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot.
I thought the most interesting part was the first time you picked up a plank. which was, I don't know, maybe when you were playing with Abby, it wasn't even with Ellie. And I was like, thank God there wasn't all of this in here again, because that's all I can remember from the first game is every time you got to an area, you got to find the plank or find the pallet to float it around. And even Ellie makes a point of it when they're at the museum. If you jump in the water, there's a plank over by the side, and she goes swimming over it. Yeah, the pallet. That's what it is. Yep. I think the puzzle aspect was handled much better in this game, and when you first get to Seattle, that open world area, as much as I was stressed out by trying to find everything and go in every corner and spending probably like 6 hours in that small open area, was refreshing to see. I was a little upset that there wasn't more of that later in the game. But other than that, the combat I enjoyed. I loved every second of the combat. I thought it was enthralling. It was intense. And gruesome, which some people don't like, but I think it adds a real realistic element to the whole situation that makes it much more enjoyable, in my opinion, because it really made me connect to what everybody was experiencing.
Yeah, it makes the world feel real. As I think a lot of combat in games is hollow, and it's like, oh, I shot this dude, he's dead, he's on the floor. And this is like, oh shit, I just fucking killed that guy. Like, fuck, I gotta get out of here soon because 3 other people are coming. And it just feels more natural and realistic in that way.
Yeah.
So I can understand that. You're also still a vicious monster who likes to kill people in games.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Exactly. Ellie's gotta do what she has to do. Alex, you kind of mentioned some thoughts.
Yeah, I think that your comment about it feeling realistic is apt. I think that the way I would describe it is combat in The Last of Us Part 2 is designed to break down no matter how best laid your plans are. Like I was saying earlier, like even if you try to be a perfect stealthy individual, eventually your stealth is going to break down. If you try to go guns blazing, eventually your gunplay is going to break down. You kind of have to accept that you're going to have to rely on a variety of different skills in each combat encounter. And like I said, I think that it took me a little while to kind of come to accept that, because I feel like I was led astray going into The Last of Us Part 2 of to what extent the game would let me play according to how I wanted to. But despite that, I do respect it for what it is. Can I offer a hot take right here and right now on a small aspect of the combat of The Last of Us Part 2, though, that I
of course
fear might ruffle some feathers. Okay. I don't know why I said feathers. It's feathers. There's not an L in feathers. Okay, so when you kill enemies, oftentimes enemies will shout out the name of whoever it is that you just killed. Like, oh no, John, Jensen, Bill, Harry, Mary, so on and so forth. Every single time that happened, half of me was like, I genuinely do feel bad. I think the game is effective at making me feel sympathetic for the people that I'm knocking off. The other half of me was, I can see the hand of the developer, the hand in this case being Naughty Dog, specifically inserting that into the game to make me feel bad.
I didn't feel bad. What I felt was, oh, that's realistic, because if I was in the woods with Holden and he just got shot, and Chad was behind me, be like, oh shit, Holden just got shot. Come on, Chad, let's go see what the hell's going on.
Don't let it with me.
Yeah. It's like the first time in a game where I may have experienced that. I can't think of anything else, but it just drove that realism home even more for me. I didn't feel bad. I mean, I felt bad for like the first dog I killed, I think, but after that, it was...
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
I did feel more bad killing the dogs than I did killing the people. For sure.
Well, so to that point, I think one of the reasons why you might have felt bad about killing the dogs is because one of the dogs that you kill, whose name is Bear, you actually get to see at the beginning of Abby's campaign. And that isn't that isn't true of a lot of the other one-note NPCs that you kill.
True.
Like the only other NPC that comes to mind that is not part of the group of people that killed Joel at the beginning of the game is the Vita woman.
Yep.
I don't remember who her name is, but she stuck out to me as the only 1-bit NPC that you see at the beginning of Abby's campaign that's like, oh yeah, I remember her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I played fetch with Bear for like a half an hour, so that's very
That's why
sad.
it took you 37 hours to beat the game.
Yeah.
You're just playing fetch the whole time.
One reason.
I think on the, names
were
thing, Alex, I think they were effective, and it made it more realistic to hear the names being thrown out there. But I do agree with you that every time I heard someone shout a name, I was like, "Oh, that's the thing Naughty Dog is doing to make this more effective." I had
Yeah.
that thought every time I heard a name.
Well, Neil had mentioned it in like an interview a while back before the game had come out, like around the time like the February release date was announced. So I knew that was coming. I knew to expect it. And so, yeah, the first time I heard it, I'm like, hey, Neil Druckmann said that was going to happen. I definitely feel you there. But it did make me kind of go like, oh, that's right, though. Like, it's representing a real world. And these people would have names. They would be, like Dallas said, like, if I were shot in the woods, I would hope Dallas would go, oh, my God,
hold it.
Like,
What the fuck?
as opposed to, like, in any other video game where it's like, someone's around.
What was that? I heard a noise. One thing I will mention though about the combat is to Cozy's point, where if things broke down all the time for me, basically in every combat situation, and it was mostly because of if I got loud, I tried to be as stealthy as possible, and my resources were low most of the time, but if I went loud, I would get outflanked all the time. And it's tough to see if you don't have the upgraded, sensor thing, the sneaking sight. I would get outflanked and shot from behind all the time. So yeah, it was tough to get through some encounters. I mean, I was playing on hard, so I don't know. I dumped it down to very light for the second playthrough, and it's a lot more fun. So if you're looking to have fun instead of like a realistic experience, I guess play it very light.
I liked that having to think on my feet almost all the time in the game. I was trying to be stealthy. Oh shit! Like now they're coming after me. If someone saw me, oh great, I have a silencer. Like take him out really quick. Okay, I don't think anyone saw me. Like having to kind of think really quickly on my feet like that was really fantastic. But it also makes the moments where I was successful being super stealthy really satisfying.
Absolutely.
Going back to Hillcrest again, there is that one part where it's the first time you see a dog and you run away and you have to go to the red door, right?
Yep.
Getting to that red door and pushing up against that red door and starting to hear the tone that happens when someone's kind of seeing you and wondering what's going on, and then they go, hey, wait, what's that right there? And then I slipped in the door. So satisfying. It was so satisfying.
That's awesome.
That change in the gameplay is the fear, I think, in the gameplay. That know it can go wrong all the time. Like, that's kind of how I felt as well. Like, if I got away after they had seen me, it's okay, now I have to be extra careful because they're onto me. Like, I need to be more aware of what's happening. And I tried to also not use my listening ability that often because I felt like that made it more tense and less video game-esque to actually... use my eyes and like peer around or like peer in this corner really quickly, because you can look around a corner and pull back, and even if someone's walking right towards you, they won't see you instantly, so you can kind of get away with acting like
what
that,
did you
depending
play
on how close. Moderate.
Hard, they see you everywhere. Like you get that like and then it's done. Like really? I play on very light, it's like and then they see you. But on hard, it was like instant, and that's the worst part about trying to play stealthy was if you screwed up that little bit, if you didn't take out enough of them, because it seemed to be even more. If you didn't take out enough of them, you were gonna get outflanked all the time. So it was tough.
God, that's the thing too, is how smart the AI is in this game. Like, you can't stay in one position. This is not a cover shooter. You can't just stay behind cover and, like, pop out and kill someone. Like, you have to keep moving all the time.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you're fucked. You're totally
Especially with
fucked.
the dogs like that. Is there a game that has that element in it? It's like that was... That added a whole new element to gameplay.
It put the fear in you of having to maybe murder that dog, which I just did not want to do. No way.
If you put a bomb down and you run away, you don't really see it. So
you can also just throw a brick and it will distract it.
Yeah,
and lose your scent. So I would try doing that as often as possible.
Well, I had to kill it either way. So
you can also shoot it in the head and it will distract it.
I'm a Molotov one. I haven't done that yet.
I didn't use the trip mines that often.
Oh, the trip mines are so good, dude.
I didn't really.
They were the best weapon in my opinion in the game.
I use
them when things went loud. I didn't use them to be really sneaky. But once things got loud and people were on you, it was the best. It was the best thing to use.
I use the in my case, my favorite go-to weapon was the pipe bombs on Abby's run. Those things,
Vicious.
the MVP of your arsenal.
Yep.
Especially in that hospital boss fight.
Oh my god, dude.
Ooh, yeah, that really cool boss fight. Kind of simple fight, IMO. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, there was like the mechanics to it were simple. It kicked my ass like 6 times, but yeah, it was.
Yeah,
You know, it was just run away, shoot, run away, shoot. It wasn't anything like complicated about it, but
it
I was
reminded
just
me a lot.
shitting my pants the whole time. So
Sorry.
it's okay.
It reminded me a lot of the gymnasium fight in Last of Us Part 1. We're in that gymnasium and the big bloater dude comes up. They're not a bloater. What is it called? Is it called a bloater?
It's
in
a
that game? I
bloater,
can't
yeah.
remember what they're called.
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of that, except this was a much better atmosphere. It was so dark and creepy, and the water meant that you really couldn't try to be sneaky because it could always hear you. Like, that was great. I love that
Intense.
moment. Yeah, very, very intense.
As soon as I saw that ambulance doors open and that nest thing in there, I was like, what? I'm like, no, I don't want to fight this fucking thing.
So we've talked about the story, we've talked about kind of the spoilers, we talked about the gameplay. I'm curious how you guys feel like this is going to influence storytelling and gaming going forward. 'Cause I feel like this took it to a different level for me.
So, I mean, I want to start off and say I made fun of it slightly earlier, but like I would be surprised if most games from here on out don't adopt having enemies call out the names of their friends when they get killed. Like it's
Absolutely.
it's 100% going to become a trope. Feels like a mean word. It's 100% going to become a thing now in AAA games, and who knows? It might become such a commonplace thing that when I come back to this game, I won't regard it in the same way that I regarded it the first time I played it. I might just be like, oh yeah, that's just normal now.
Yeah.
I hope they
I
do,
agree.
and for 2020's sake, I hope they're all named Karen, and I'm just shooting a bunch of Karens.
Every time, oh no, Karen.
Yeah, whatever.
Yes.
Oh no.
I don't feel bad at all.
I think on a storytelling level, it took gaming. I feel like I've always had this idea that gaming has a capacity for empathy that no other medium has, because you have to play as the character. And I've never seen a game live up to that so highly. And I really hope that that is taken from other, is just taken, and that stories really try to offer multiple perspectives in their gameplay like that. And I think that could really lead to some really great, unique storytelling that kind of only gaming could provide. Like, for example, they're making Last of Us Part 2, or Last of Us, the TV show on HBO. Is like Season 2 going to be 5 episodes as Ellie, 5 episodes as Abby? And is that really going to have the same impact as playing as Ellie and playing as Abby? I don't know. I think that might feel kind of weird in comparison to playing it.
I wonder if that's why video game movies are always just not as good,
Yeah.
because you just can't connect emotionally to all those characters.
In my opinion, Sonic the Hedgehog movie is way better than any Sonic the Hedgehog game.
Yeah, well, you don't get emotionally connected to Sonic in the game, but in the movie, hell yeah, I love that little shit.
You know, I would say the same about the Pokemon movie. Pokemon movie's way better than any of the Pokemon games.
I haven't played a Pokemon game or seen the Pokemon movie, so I can't
Your poor kid.
speak to
See,
you about
I
that.
think Pokemon movie is way above Sonic. I think
I wanna
it's
hear it.
crazy for thinking that's
I wanna
the best
Specifically, you're
Sonic.
talking about
It's
Detective
video game.
Pikachu, not
Detective
the 20
Pikachu. Oh, yeah,
animated
yeah,
Pokemon
Detective
movies.
Yeah, no, the live action one. But that's all besides the point. So yeah, I think that in terms of like empathy, this set the bar for me. And like, is it a bar that could even be surpassed by other developers? Like, I have no idea.
So I'll always go back to Red Dead because it's the only other emotional connection I carried with a character besides Kratos too, but because I knew Kratos in other stories and his, I guess you could say his legacy is tarnished by those stories. It's tough to connect emotionally on the same level that I did with these characters in any other game besides with Arthur Morgan. And it's weird because I spoke on the last episode we did here about the regret that I felt as like a main, not a theme that they were trying to get across, but a theme that I felt. And it was basically because I empathized with with Ellie so much that I just was so afraid of her dying in complete regret of everything she's done. You know, going after Abby at the end there, holding her under the water, you know, choking her out. She just let go, and I was. We talked about if we fought that battle completely. You know, Matt talked about how he didn't want to fight her. He wanted to just let it go. And I wanted to fight her because I was afraid that Abby was going to kill her. And I didn't want Ellie to die because I was empathizing with her. I was like, she's just going to die full of regret. And I don't think I could ever feel that way about anybody in any medium other than a video game written by Naughty Dog.
Mm-hmm. So more so than just video games, you think video games made by Naughty Dog specifically?
Yeah, I mean, Rockstar did a great job with Arthur Morgan, but I don't know.
I still haven't beaten Red Dead Redemption.
I know you
2,
haven't.
So I can't.
I don't think anybody here
comment
has.
on it.
Have you,
Anyone
Alex?
in the world has.
No,
I think you're
sorry.
lying about having beaten it.
I played the shit out of that game. I definitely beat it.
I know
Sorry,
how it
I've
ends. I spoiled myself on that.
See, I got spoiled on that. I didn't know exactly how it went. I guess I kind of had that same feeling that you guys had about Joel. Like, I knew what was going to happen. I didn't know when. I didn't know how. So it brought that stress level up like tenfold for me. But it's a great game, man.
Yeah, I've been thinking for the past few minutes, like, what tropes from this game will become popular in AAA gaming over the next few years, in the same way that, like, the trope of the older man and his younger ward became a trope in so many other AAA games after the original The Last of Us. And I'm not certain right off the bat, like, of one that comes to mind, but maybe you guys might have some ideas?
I guess for me, it's not so much that like tropes. I think you are is a good call out that I hadn't realized until you said it was the whole NPCs having names. That I think that will definitely become a thing going forward. Absolutely. I think for me, it's more that, you know, is this raising the bar for storytelling in video games to the point where we are just as a video game community going to want that more and want to see that more. I think it's kind of more where my head's at on it. A lot of the gameplay mechanics here are so specific to the story that it's used to convey this specific story that I guess I'm kind of curious if other developers are going to really start taking minute gameplay mechanics as a connection to the story as opposed to just existing for a gameplay loop, and kind of how much narrative is going to become a much more important part of storytelling.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think, you know, one thing that we need to keep in mind here is that Naughty Dog, before The Last of Us Part 2 was even an inkling in their minds, was already an incredibly celebrated developer. And so I think that we forgive The Last of Us Part 2's, you know, more painful or uncomfortable moments because we trust that Naughty Dog is trying to communicate something salient to us, in the same way that we forgive Kojima Games' more clunky moments because we think that Kojima is trying to communicate something really intellectual to us as well. And like, I think it remains to be seen whether more developers are able to do the same thing, because I can totally see a lesser developer attempting to do something very similar here and just not getting the same recognition because people don't immediately associate that studio with the same level of acclaim as Naughty Dog, as the same level of, as a studio that puts as much thought and into their products as Naughty Dog does.
Right. Yeah, it's tough for me to bring to mind a game that I felt this way about. You know, Chad just asked me, and I couldn't even think of it. But I didn't play Senua's Sacrifice. I heard that's another really deep emotional game. Plague's Tale, I heard too. You know, smaller developers
Still do play that.
that'll really, you know, have some superb writing ability and whatnot and storytelling. So yeah, it's a great point, Alex. I mean, you know, hopefully this just raises the bar and everybody gets that appreciation they deserve for writing something that's amazing.
Yeah, basically, like, long story short, I hope that more developers will come out now and be like, hey, we're going to try something a little bit more unconventional in terms of the storytelling of our game, or unconventional in terms of our gameplay, so that we can try and drive home a point. And it remains to be seen, though, whether they will actually go ahead and do that. Because at the end of the day, there has to be a financial reality to these games. And
Risk.
I feel like with Naughty Dog, that was never a concern because they're so beloved of a studio. But with other studios, that is a legitimate concern.
They're also first party, so if they can just tell Sony, hey, we're making this brilliant game. Give us more money so we can make this brilliant game and make your console look amazing. I think if anyone's going to be pushing it, it's not going to be like an Activision or an EA. I can't imagine EA is going to release this emotionally wrenching story.
You think NBA 2K22 is going to have a good story?
Then maybe that might be the exception. Who knows? But I can see Microsoft saying, hey, we want to have games that compete with Sony, and we have to have some great emotional storytelling. So they might decide to do something there. Like maybe is it the Coalition or the Initiative? Coalition is the new one. No, Initiative is the new one. Whichever
Coalition
one.
did Gears of War.
The Initiative is the new one then?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Like maybe the Initiative is going to be like, hey, we're going to make a narrative game, and it's going to make you cry and all that at the end of it. Like that's the goal. Like I can actually see that happening because I think that's something that can really makes PlayStation's platform unique. Like I talk about how I like Nintendo games because Nintendo games are like toys that you can play with. I don't really have an emotional connection the same way that I have PlayStation games, but I've cried with two games, Last of Us and The Last Guardian. Both were PlayStation 4 exclusives. To me now, when I'm thinking about PlayStation exclusive games, I'm thinking a game that has the ability for me to feel for the characters in the same way I would feel for characters in a movie or a television show. And so I would hope that Sony takes that kind of going forward, and I hope Microsoft tries to match them on that. I think that would be just hugely beneficial for video games being taken seriously.
Absolutely.
The last thing I'll say on the matter is I do wonder if we'll also get more games going forward, whether they're super subversive in their gameplay or not, that features stories that kind of attempt to show things more from the villain's perspective, because that was such a huge component of Abby's campaign. I wouldn't be surprised if we were to get more sequences like the sniper on the bridge sequence where you get a brief shot of Tommy, but if instead of it being The Last of Us Part 2, it's Spider-Man 2, and it's, I don't know, the Green Goblin or the whatchamacallit trying to cross a bridge, getting shot at by Spidey, and then you see a brief snippet of Spidey at the end falling into the water.
Can't wait for that whatchamacallit battle.
I don't know. Just a thought of who knows if this might become another trope that might become popular in the industry. Remains to be seen.
Do you know what third-party developer I can see taking that approach of really having you sympathize with the villain and kind of going for that more kind of dual approach? Is Ubisoft. I can see Ubisoft trying to do that. They kind of have the villain as a prominent part of the Far Cry series, and has always been, the villain's kind of more important than the protagonist in a lot of ways. I can see them trying to do that.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we kind of saw this. Spoilers for BioShock Infinite. We kind of saw this with BioShock Infinite with Booker and Comstock, and you realize you are the same person, and you're fighting over the same girl the entire time that was your daughter.
Yeah. That's
and
good.
That was 2K?
That was 2K, yeah.
There was also there was the Assassin's Creed game where you play as one of the Templars, if I recall correctly. You guys know what I'm talking about?
I don't
vaguely remember that.
Assassin's Creed
this is like one of those years where they had an Assassin's Creed. They had an Assassin's Creed game for the then next generation platforms, so the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and this was the one on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3.
Assassin's Creed Rogue.
Yeah, Rogue.
Yeah, there we go. The thing about that game is they sort of buried it when it released. They didn't want to advertise it as their big prominent Assassin's Creed release, because it wasn't their next gen game at the time. And I can see them being all right, let's take this kind of a story which we've already done and make it our big headlining next Assassin's Creed game. Maybe we'll see.
So before we get to our kind of closing thoughts, one last thing I wanted to talk with you guys, and if there's anything else you want to talk about as well, we can incorporate that too. I was kind of thinking while playing this, how PS5, how would a Naughty Dog PS5 game be different than what we saw here? Because in a lot of ways this felt very next gen to me anyway. But I'm curious if I had a few thoughts. I was kind of curious if you guys had any of kind of like, ooh, like this on next gen will be X?
I can't think of anything because really the big pitch we've been taught about next gen is load times, and
Right.
I don't remember load times in this game because they were hidden so
Yeah,
extra.
it's-
So well. Yeah.
Shockingly, like the load times in this game are shockingly low. I'm so surprised.
Yeah, when you die, you get right back into the combat. I was thinking about sound. Like I wasn't using the listening mode that much. But I'm thinking like, man, wouldn't it be great if that 3D audio I could actually hear and like listen? Like, oh, I heard a scuttle of a footstep
Right.
over there. They're probably in this general direction. I'm like, that would be really badass in a Last of Us game. To like really be listening into your environment and like hearing where shuffles at. And you can't use the listen mode. You have to rely on your ears and what you can hear. I think that would be sick.
As long as
But
it works the
that's
way
kind of
they
me.
say it's going to work, that would be sick.
It will
I
as
hope-
long as you send in your ear molds. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like a next generation The Last of Us game probably would incorporate more sequences like the one at the very beginning of Seattle, where Ellie and Abby are exploring the downtown area, and it's very. I don't. It's not like an open world, but it is very open ended. At the same time, though, I kind of feel like they could have made The Last of Us Part 2, like the entirety of the game, like that sequence, and they chose not to.
Apparently,
So-
they were going to. I thought I read something.
Yeah, much more open-ended worlds. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, I can, like, to be honest, I can totally just see The Last of Us Part 3 feeling very similar to The Last of Us Part 2, but just, yeah, with better audio fidelity, better graphics, and whatnot.
I was also thinking about probably one of the most intense sequences in the whole game for me, and I've gone back and replayed it a few times now because I think it's just so expertly done, is that first car chase at the end of Hillcrest, where you get in the truck and you're shooting it all around it. Like, was that sequence actually kind of short, though? It stuck with me, but it's a pretty short sequence. It's really not that long.
Right,
was it
right.
not long because that's what they felt like was the appropriate length for that sequence, or because there's something where it's like, okay, like if we start continuing the sequence, we can only load in so much assets at once that we can't actually pull this off for a longer period of time? Like, could we get bigger kind of set pieces like that on a PS5 because that loading wouldn't be an issue at all? Or is that kind of just how Naughty Dog already wants it to be? I don't know. I have no idea.
I thought that it was the perfect length, to be honest with you. I wouldn't want that to have gone on longer or be more prevalent in the game itself. I thought that was like a perfect little spice into that game where it's just like, oh shit, like the most intense, minute and a half or whatever it was. And you didn't get that all the time. It wasn't like this over the top action all the time. Kind of like a Uncharted game, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. There's not a lot in this game that's super obvious of this is how they could definitively improve it for next generation. In part because, like, I feel like there are a lot of things in this game that they could have done way more grander than they did in this game, but they specifically chose not to because that was not their vision of what they wanted this game to be. And so with that in mind, it's hard to imagine, like, oh yeah, The Last of Us Part 3 is totally going to be totally open world. Like, it's pretty clear that's not what they want to do with the series.
Right.
Yeah, I guess we'll just get
Yeah.
even closer to photorealism.
Right.
Like, so much more than we already are, which is amazing.
Even more perfect breaking of glass.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And maybe here's the next thing they're going to do with PS5. Like one step up from everyone having a name to make you feel bad for killing them, you're going to be able to scan your face into the game, and every bad guy's going to be you.
That you.
You're going to be like,
Ooh.
I can't kill me. I'm just too good.
Also, when you get like in a really emotional, sad moment and you just feel like you need a friend there, you can have your little AI Sony buddy next to you to give
right,
you a
that's
hug. And you can talk into your microphone to be like, thanks, bud. All right. So, are there any kind of final thoughts you guys wanted to add into the conversation before we finish up here?
I think we discussed a little bit about the companions and other characters in this game that stood out much more than what we experienced in the first game. Memorable appearances, loved them all. I mean, I can't think of one of them besides maybe Mel that I didn't like. So I thought they did a fantastic job with introducing these other characters that I fell in love with, and it was, even texting about Owen and Chad just going, "Oh, I love Owen," and then even Jesse, "Oh, I love Jesse." It was like everybody, we loved everybody. It was just awesome. They did a fantastic job with that.
I feel you on Mel for sure. I also need to point out, I don't know if anyone here saw Angry Joe's 45-minute review on The Last of Us, but one of his big complaints was Mel, because she's pregnant and wants to go on the front lines of duty and is climbing up these crates and bashing her stomach into man, I'm like, holy shit, you're doing so much damage to your child right now. What are you doing? And as soon as he pointed that out, I'm like, I can't not see it. I can't not see it.
Yeah.
But I think she had to be there.
And the amniotic sac and all the fluid in there, it's to protect the baby from being hit on
It's nice
boxes.
and safe in there.
You're right. Shaking babies is totally fine.
As long as they're in fluid in an amniotic sac, they're good. Shake them away. In fact, if you put a baby in it, we'll move on. We'll move on.
She was definitely there for that moment where when Abby goes to slit Dina's throat, she's pregnant. And my first immediate thought was, yeah, you killed a pregnant woman too, though, Ellie. You can't. And there's so many moments where it's look how Ellie and Abby do the same, or in the same kind of scenarios, and look at the difference in how they respond. Mm-hmm. Even on really subtle things, when you first start off as Abby, one of the early things you do as Abby is you pet a dog. When you're playing as Ellie and you're walking through town with Jesse, one of the first things you do is pet a dog. There's little things like that where it's oh, look at them. They're exactly the same. They're the same. They kind of deal with the same situations, but they respond differently. Ellie's kind of filled with hate. Abby has somewhat more love in her than Ellie does.
Except for Mel. She hates Mel.
Except for Mel. Yep. She hates Mel. Yeah.
Which is understandable.
Oh, I would get it too. I felt so bad for her when that whole Mel's pregnant. I hadn't even gotten to the Owen and Abby relationship yet, and I'm like, oh, that's gotta be harsh.
Yeah. At first, I couldn't tell. I thought they were brother and sister. I don't know. I'm like, okay, so your brother's having a baby with some chick you don't like, I guess. But it's not. What's the relationship they have?
Now I gotta be with her the rest of my life, and I gotta like the kid. Ugh.
All right.
I do want to give a shout out to the way that they introduced swimming in this game via the cutscene at the Dinosaur Museum.
Yep.
I thought it was very clever to have Joel push Ellie into the water and show off, oh, hey, guess what? Ellie can swim now. Nice little detail there.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you something. Did any of us not push Joel in the water? Because I definitely did. Every time I played that, I pushed Joel in the water.
Oh, yeah. Push him in the water. Come on.
Okay.
Did you climb up the dinosaur?
Well, because we know what happens when you don't push him. Does he just jump in on his own? I don't even know. Don't want to know. I just want to push Joel in the water every time. All right. So that's all of our thoughts. We're good?
So.
All right.
Yeah.
Everyone, thank you for joining for the Last of Us Part 2 Spoiler Cast Part 2. Do you guys want to plug your shit?
I don't have any shit to plug, so.
Always the guest, never the bride.
That's right.
Yeah, if you like me here, you can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/CozyBearLive. That's KOZIBEARLIVE. And of course, you can follow me on the Twitters at Alex Kozina, ALEXKOZINA.
And I'm
I'm
Holden
here.
Pardo.
I'm on Respawning Fire.
Yep. Do you know this podcast? You might have listened to it before. Yeah, Holden and Chad here from Respawning Fire. Thanks for joining us. Chad, do you want to lead us off to our usual sign-off?
Here we go. And